Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of Age Gap Love Story. And we are Carrie and Alan, a married couple with a 32-and-a-half-year age difference. We started this podcast and YouTube channel to offer information, support, and community to help make your age gap relationship successful. And today we are talking about communication skills and how to solve conflict effectively in age gap relationships. And Alan is feeling a teensy bit under the weather today, so I may be doing most of the talking.
As usual.
Ha ha ha. And also, if you're watching the YouTube channel, you may see that Alan finally has his own microphone. So he's very excited about that, and hopefully it will improve our audio quality as long as he doesn't speak over me.
I can interrupt anytime I want.
No, you can't. Talking about communication and solving conflict, we got a lot of great emails and messages from our listeners and viewers, and you are the ones who inspired this episode. So thank you for your messages. You can always email us at agegaplovestory@gmail.com, or you can check out our website, agegaplovestory.com, where we have all the social media links and a contact form. And we'd love to hear from you if you have suggestions for topics or you have questions, and then we will try to respond to you or turn your question into a podcast episode, although we do make sure to keep everyone's identity and privacy protected.
Except ours.
Right. We do seem to try to share all of our experiences very honestly with you. And also, just to let you know, we're not therapists or relationship experts other than having a relatively positive relationship for 22 years, but we are trying to share our experience and any resources and tips that we come across. And we really just want to help you. And so, again, today's episode was inspired by someone who had a question about how to, this person had been fairly recently divorced and was curious about how to prepare for a second marriage. And so it made me think about how when I met Alan 22 years ago, he had been recently out of his first marriage. He was actually going through a divorce and had been married for 25 years?
32.
Oh my goodness. So, and I can just say from what I heard from Alan that it wasn't a completely positive and healthy relationship. And so Alan brought some baggage with him. And so I think that can be one of the issues with second marriages. And not to say that I was perfect. I mean, I did not grow up in a healthy family where we had healthy communication. And so I had my own baggage. But specifically for age gap relationships, I think this can be an issue. If one partner has gone through a divorce or a difficult previous relationship or family life, then they can bring unhealthy communication and conflict resolution habits to the relationship.
Yeah, let's put it this way. We had so much baggage that we took a long trip to unpack.
So also, I think one issue that can come up between age gap partners is there actually can be generational differences. For instance, I know that for myself, and even more so for like women and men and women younger than me, more like the, what do they call it? The millennials. They are seem to be very open about feelings, especially like for men. Boys these days are taught a lot more about expressing their feelings. I know my sister has a son, and Alan has 2 grandsons, and it seems like young boys these days are taught that it's okay to cry and to feel sad, which I think is wonderful and healthy, versus when Alan was growing up, and Alan actually has improved a lot in his telling me how he feels, but I think when you grew up, I would imagine that boys were not taught to that it's okay to cry and it's okay to, I don't know, was it different for you?
In all the big boy cowboy movies, they never cried. That's right. We were taught to be the men don't cry. That was stuff for weaker people, and it's okay for girls to cry, but not for boys.
Right, so that is a perfect example of a generational difference where I think it's perfectly fine for boys to cry or men and to feel their feelings. I think
Yes,
it's healthy.
but boys were allowed to do a lot of other stuff.
Okay, so we talked about some of these issues, generational differences, bad habits from previous relationships. Also, I think there is a risk in age gap relationships to have a power imbalance. And if you want more information about this, I will refer you to episode 4 of Age Gap Love Story, where we talked in depth about picking a partner and more about like habits around positive, healthy relationships. But this power imbalance, which can occur between people of different age differences and in other relationships too. But if somebody feels like they're not maybe equal in the relationship, then they may feel more hesitation in expressing their feelings and maybe bringing up issues that bother them. And so these are just things to be aware of in age gap relationships. So let's move on to, we basically have 2, or I would say 3 main topics today. We're going to talk really briefly about some common communication problems. Then we'll talk about positive communication skills. So we have like the negative communication skills, the positive communication skills, and then we'll talk also about how to resolve conflict effectively. And this is just based on research that I have done, and I have some references that I will link to in the show notes and the blog post and the YouTube description, and then also our own experiences. So some common communication problems that can occur in couples can range from anything from not listening well to worrying that if you actually talk about a problem that it will make it worse, expecting your partner to be a mind reader, shutting down when negative emotions arise, always trying to be right, and using universal statements. So I am guilty of this one. So if I feel like Alan, let's say I get upset that he's not listening, I might say to him, "You never listen to me." That's a universal statement versus saying, "Right now, when I just told you that, you weren't listening to me." And that can impact Alan much differently when I tell him those things, and versus he has done that to me too. And when you tell somebody a universal statement, "You always do this," as somebody who's being told that, you feel very defeated, versus if somebody said, "Right now when you did that, you know, it made me feel this way," then you can say, "Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I did that." And then invalidating feelings of the other person is a common communication problem.
Yes.
So those are the problems that can occur, but then let's move on to positive communication skills. And these skills I got from Psychology Today, which is a great website.
But before we go forward, I just wanted to interject one thing about, as part of communication skills, which I don't think we touched on maybe in a previous episode, and that is full disclosure. And let me give you an example of that. When I was dating after separated from my first wife, I had a date with a lady that I met after work, and we went out for dinner. She mentioned nothing about either having a child or having a previous relationship. And when I brought her home, waiting for us at home was an ex-boyfriend who stopped by to visit her child, which I was unaware of. Not that it was a big deal, but it was a bit of a surprise. And this ex-boyfriend looked like Bruce Lee. This guy looked like he could snap up my neck in about 1 nanosecond. And he was very aggressive and hostile, wanted to know what I was doing there. The bottom line was this guy was potentially dangerous and violent. And this lady had shared nothing with me about either the child or this clingy, violent ex-boyfriend. So needless to say, I could not wait to get out of there. I left so fast that it created a vacuum from the wind. So that's an example of full disclosure as part of a good communication.
Okay, so we'll move on to positive communication skills. And I think that from this article I read, it said that if you don't know how to ask for what you need, you're less likely to have your needs met. And that sounds kind of like, yeah, very obvious, but I think it's very true. I would say that there's a little bit more to that, in that if you don't know what you need, then you can't ask for what you need, and then you can't get what you need. So it kind of goes even deeper. But this all comes down to communication and, of course, knowing yourself and your own needs. But if you enhance your communication skills, then you are more likely to be heard and be understood, which we all want.
Yes, I would use the expression that I learned many years ago from my mother, and that is asking is not stealing. So if you ask for something in a polite, proper, and affirmative way, a respectful way, it's better than not having asks. You'll never know if you don't ask.
So the first tip of positive communication skills, and this would be for anything from talking about something that you need, to talking about a problem that you're having, to just talking about how was your day, kind of thing. But so this really applies to any type of communication that you're going to have with your partner. And the first tip is that you would pick the right location and basically the right moment. And I think we've kind of touched on this before, but if you, I think we talked about this when we were in episode probably 5, where we talked about telling your family about your age gap relationship. And that is, when you want to communicate something to somebody, you have to make sure they're in the right place to listen. If somebody is busy, working on a project, or they're rushing out the door to an appointment, that's not the right time to try to communicate your feelings, because they're not able to connect with you. For example, in this article from Psychology Today, they mentioned don't talk about money in bed. So I'm assuming they mean like if you're trying to go to sleep, or maybe you're being romantic, that's really not the right time to bring up your concerns about finances. So that is just an example, and I feel like it is a little bit obvious, but it is something to consider. The second tip is to give your partner your attention. And so if you feel like your partner is trying to communicate with you, now more than ever, it's important to put down your phone, just not be distracted, because that is a very quick way to create conflict, is when you're trying to talk to somebody and they're obviously not listening.
Yes, we talked about a system actually some years ago where it was difficult for me to respond when Carrie needed something for her to get my attention. So the way we resolved that was we got a large basket of golf balls. And when Carrie needed me, she would throw one of the golf balls rather hard and hit me usually on the forehead, and that would immediately get my attention.
Right, where is that basket?
I think I ate all the golf balls.
But it's true. Sometimes, Alan is a man, and let's say that there's the stereotype that men don't listen as well as women. I'm sure that is a stereotype. I'm sure there's plenty of men who are wonderful listeners. But for Alan specifically, when I do have something important and I can tell he's distracted, but it's something that I need to talk to him immediately, I will actually say, are you listening right now? And not in a condescending way, but really like, are you listening because I have something important to tell you? And that tells Alan he needs to listen.
Yet that usually precedes the 2x4.
Or the golf ball. But this all actually is part of a technique called active listening. And so showing that your partner or whoever's talking to you, that you are engaged and listening, part of that is making eye contact, putting away distractions, perhaps leaning in a little bit to show your partner that you're listening. This is, again, part of this technique called active listening. And I promise you, if you practice it, your communication skills will very much improve, because listening is one of the major problems with communication. Okay, another one is to not interrupt. And that's kind of obvious too, but it is something, I think interrupting people can become a bad habit. And fortunately, I don't think either one of us, we really try not to interrupt each other. I have had that experience with somebody close to me, and it is incredibly frustrating. And so if you feel like you're guilty of that, then really make an effort. And the way you do that is you let the other person finish what they're saying.
And while they're finishing what they're saying, try to focus on that and just don't think about how you're going to respond.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because you've done that before.
Me?
Yeah, so and that, I think, is also part of active listening, which that point is reflect back to your partner what you think your partner is saying. So this is exactly to Alan's point. If I'm telling Alan how I feel about something, and then he just responds with, I don't know, like a completely different point or something, then it's obvious he wasn't really listening. Versus if he said, I understand that you're frustrated by this, but this is how I feel. So he's reflected back to me what he heard me say. And so that is a part of active listening. It's a part of positive communication skills.
Yes, and I would like to emphasize here that positive communication skills are not only important in your personal, romantic, age gap, whatever relationship, but they're important in life, whether you're talking to your employer, employees, with friends. It's really important to follow these specific suggestions to make you a better communicator. If you note people who are very successful in various walks of life, they will have these skills to listen to what the other person is saying, to rephrase and repeat back to them what they understood that person to be saying, and then to move forward with their own comments.
Yes, so another way you can do that is you can say, what I hear you saying is, or if I understand you correctly, then I think that you feel, and those are two ways to reflect back. And again, this is part of active listening. And I think also this really kind of makes you become and show that you are empathetic, which is a very important, helpful characteristic to healthy relationships, is having empathy. And that means that you can actually appreciate how somebody else is feeling. It gets you out of your own personal experience and helps you understand somebody else's perspective. And I think that is a very, very important life skill and relationship skill. And then I would say the last point of positive communication skills would be just not being afraid to say what you feel, being willing to listen, making sure you're hearing the message your partner is sending, not being closed off to communication. And then we're going to get into the conflict tips. But again, these don't just have to be around conflicts. These are really around any type of communication.
Jerry's taking a drink of water right now in case you're wondering about the silent gap.
So let's move on to solving conflict in relationships. And these tips I got from a website called loveisrespect.org. I believe it is a website dedicated to preventing like domestic violence. But I thought that the tips were very helpful. And I also wanted to say that I had kind of referred to some of the baggage that Alan and I brought from previous relationships and family situations. And I feel like our communication has really improved. I mean, I think that can happen whenever you're with somebody for a long amount of time, but if you don't have, it doesn't have to be like a long period of time. You can improve your skills quickly if you make an effort. And so I learned some of these skills in a group therapy situation I was in, and I just noticed it helped so much. And it wasn't like I had to fix him. There were a lot of things that I did myself, and it just helped our communication. And I think in a way, maybe because my skills improved, then Alan's skills improved as well.
Yes.
Okay, so solving conflict effectively in age gap relationships or in any type of relationship. And again, the first tip is to find the right time, because we've talked about this before too, but if you're in a fight or flight scenario where you're angry or upset, that's really not the time when you're going to solve the problem effectively.
That's probably true in any circumstance. I think it was Abraham Lincoln who said that when he was really angry, he would write a letter to address the issue that he was angry about, put the letter in a drawer from his desk, in his desk, and then he would wait a day or two and then review the letter to see whether it was really a good way to express his discontent. And I think that's true of a circumstance in your relationship. When you're upset, whether you're angry, depressed, whatever the case may be, that probably is not the best time to address the issue.
That is a great story and a great tip.
Thank you.
Although the second point in resolving relationship conflict is to talk face to face. And I think the reason is because text messages or letters or emails can be misinterpreted. So I think this really applies to a serious relationship when you need to make sure you talk face to face. I mean, if you really want to resolve conflict, I think that, you're really going to have to do it face to face.
Yes, I'm sure that some of you have been burned in the past by the autocorrect function for either emails or texts when something appears that you really didn't want to say or makes your meaning less understandable. So again, it's better to do it in person and to think about what you're going to say before you say it rather than just sort of blurt it out. Give it some thought, even maybe make a couple of notes. And again, this is true in all types of communication, whether it's romantic, personal, business, whatever the case may be.
Yes, and another point is use the 48-hour rule. So if you are going to drop a bombshell on somebody, like, I just don't think this can work, or I don't know, you have a huge demand, if you wait 48 hours until your emotions calm down and you're thinking more rationally, then I think that things will go a lot better. And usually within 48 hours, you really can see things a lot more clearly. So give yourself that time.
Yes, in fact, a philosophy I have is that almost without exception, emotions will overrule intelligence. And the only way to moderate that is through common sense or experience. However, I think it was Mark Twain who said that common sense is not so common, and we might all agree with that.
Yes. And I would also say that a few more tips for resolving conflict with your partner would be not to attack. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, like using these universal statements, but to kind of make an even finer point about it. If you say to somebody, you've been so distant with me lately, that feels like an attack. Versus if you said, I feel like our relationship hasn't been as close lately. You can see how those two statements make you feel completely different. And I think that you will get much further along in your resolution if you try to be very careful not to make your partner feel defensive. And then another point is to be honest. And Alan and I have sometimes disagreed on this point where he is more likely to, I don't know, tell white lies. But I kind of have a policy of always speaking the truth. Now, this can get you into trouble too, but I think if you pay attention to the other rules, like picking the right time and trying not to make people feel defensive, but I think just this policy of honesty in relationships, this is something that I stick very closely to, and it's actually something that I learned in that group therapy situation. It was a therapy program that actually is about learning how to deal with your feelings. It was something that I did after I was diagnosed with cancer. I had so much trauma and fear. This was back in 2012 that I had to seek therapy. And this program really, it wasn't even for like cancer patients. It was really just for people who wanted to learn how to manage their feelings better and their emotions. And it had to do with a lot of different topics, but we did talk about relationships, and one of those tips was to always be honest and be truthful in your communication. Okay, and then I think we can move on to this last point, is how to communicate if you are actually angry and you're actively trying to resolve conflict. And I think, first of all, it's okay to understand that there will be conflict in any kind of relationship, in an age gap relationship. Alan and I, even just this morning, he wasn't feeling great, and he, spoke in a tone that I did not like, and we resolved it. And I, gave him some grace, knowing that he's not feeling his best today. Don't worry, he'll be okay. He just has a little issues of not having a great day, but he'll be okay. So, the first...
I think I have a bad case of Momo on the go-go.
Okay, TMI. So understanding that it's okay to have conflict, and this is actually something I also learned in my therapy group, was that because I grew up feeling like anger was an emotion that was not a safe emotion, and I had to learn how to feel angry, and that it was okay to feel angry sometimes. It's equally as valid an emotion as happiness and joy and fear. These are all natural human emotions, and it's really just how we manage them that is the important part. So if you are feeling angry with your partner, you have a situation that makes you angry, the first step is to stop. And so this website gave 4 points: stop, think, talk, and listen. So you stop. You don't want to speak to your partner when you're in a rage. That's not going to help anybody. So you just stop, calm down, take a walk, take some deep breaths, do whatever you need to do. Think. So you evaluating the situation. Is this really as bad as I think it is? What's actually going on here? Use your rational brain as opposed to your emotional brain. Which
Serenity now.
Okay, and then talk. So this is when it's time to communicate. After you've calmed down, you've analyzed the situation, then you're using these positive communication skills to approach your partner and figure out what's going on. And then listen is the last step. You're using your active listening, you're communicating with each other. So we know that communication is a skill. You're always welcome to use a therapist or look for books or other resources to improve your communication skills. It's something that you can work on every day. And it doesn't have to just be with your partner. It can be with anybody in your life. But it's so important to have positive communication skills and conflict resolution skills when you're in a serious relationship. It's going to make you both so much happier, and I think secure your relationship, because when this listener emailed me and told me about being divorced and kind of thinking about second marriages, I came across the statistic that at least in the United States, 50% of first marriages end in divorce and 60% of second marriages end in divorce. And divorce is just, I think, so sad, and it's warranted in some cases, but when two people love each other, I think it's sad when things fall apart and when they could be resolved with some of these tips.
Yes, I think the bottom line is, again, in every aspect of communication, whether it's romantic, personal, with family, at work, whatever the case may be, is you don't want to say something in the heat of anger that you're going to be sorry for the next day or even in an hour from now. So that's why it's important to pause and think about what you're going to say and how you're going to say it and express whatever the issue might be. I think in human resources, remembering my business experience, I always learned that rather than just terminating somebody as an employee that wasn't working out, it was much better to work with that individual. It was less costly. You ended up generally in a much stronger position with a better employee by giving it a try to resolve the issues than just getting rid of them and then getting another employee who might not be as good as the one you just terminated.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I would also just say that remember that communication is not just about talking, but it's also about listening. So I think we will wrap up today's episode. It's a little bit of a shorter episode, but we're looking forward to the next one where we are finally going to address some of our health and nutrition and healthy aging tips. We've kind of been talking about this episode for a while, and we just haven't buckled down and really come up with a script of everything we want to talk about. It may actually be 2 episodes, but you can look forward to that next week. And I'm sure Alan will be feeling back to his perky self then. And we've actually been having a heat wave as we're recording this here in California.
Not just a heat wave, but this is being recorded in late August 2020, and we are having historic wildfires throughout California and north of where we live, which is near the Central Coast. The fires are actually quite a distance from us further up the Central Coast, and the smoke is traveling all the way down to our area as well as north up through San Francisco. And the air quality here is literally dangerous. So we have been trapped in the house, not opening windows. Fortunately, we do have air conditioning, so the heat has not been a terrible issue, but it's not only confining, but it's really uncomfortable when you do have to go outside, let alone health threatening. So that's been an issue for everybody around here, and I really feel for people that have to go outside and work in this environment. It's truly dangerous.
Yes, or people who have to evacuate or who've lost their homes.
Yes, and that's really a sad circumstance, and that's the case in many parts of California, and I think other areas in the U.S.
Yes, so we'll keep everybody in our thoughts and hope that we have safer, cooler weather soon. And everybody take care, and we look forward to connecting with you on our next episode.
That's a wrap.
Goodbye.